folks, welcome back to Indaba Africa. This is Chris once again. Hello, folks, and welcome back to Chris Wyatt Africa for this special feature, a live stream with my guest, none other than the Conscious Caracal. Ernst Van Zyl himself is here today. We're going to talk a little bit about South Africa's elections, end of the year, what's happening with events in South Africa, maybe a little bit about updates on off reform, what they're up to. So welcome back to the stream, Ernst. It's a distinct pleasure to have you back.
Oh, well, good afternoon, Chris. It's very nice being back on. It's nice to see you also pushing towards 5,000 subscribers, getting back up there. And it's nice to be here, and I look forward to the conversation. And also, good evening, wherever your listeners are from, good evening, good morning, or good afternoon to them as well.
Good point, because it is folks from around the world. Yeah, no, pushing towards 5,000, but it feels that I'm moving at a slower pace than the glaciers in Greenland are melting, apparently, according to the eco terrorists. But so moving there, but slowly. So welcome, everybody. Hey, listen. How about that election? Wow, the ANC got 13% of eligible voters in South Africa. So impressive. 20% of those who bothered to vote.
Yeah, no, it's. I think there's two main stories from this election, and those two main stories that stand out to me is firstly the ANC going below 50%, but then also the amount of voter turnout, which was absolutely abysmal. I think it was 46%, something around there.
46% of registered voters.
Yes. Well, that's even worse. But there's also something that needs to be noted with the ANC, as many of my colleagues point out, and that is the fact that the ANC election machine only powers up every 5 years. So they traditionally do very badly in municipal elections. And then when the national elections roll around, that's when they really get that machine into gear. That's when they bust people. That's when they buy food parcels. That's when they campaign that's when they campaign everywhere. So that's something that's definitely going to be in stark contrast in 2024 when we have our national elections. But yeah, in any case, the municipal elections was an absolute catastrophic disaster for the ANC, and you love to see it.
Well, to be fair to the African National Congress and the Thule House, the reason they couldn't bust people around or buy T-shirts or hand out free chicken from KFC or Chicken Lickin', personally, I advise KFC, not Chicken Lickin'. But the reason they couldn't do that is, like South Africa's government itself, the ANC is broke. They have no money. They owe hundreds of millions of rand, and that's what we're aware of. They haven't paid their employees. Now, the media keeps saying 3 months, but they said that 2 months ago. So either they've paid them a little money in the 2 months since then, or now they're 5 months without salary. In fact, the protest was kind of, sidelined by a bunch of people complaining within the ANC about mayoral candidate selections when it was supposed to be the picketing workers from the Thule House who were out there picketing, but they were kind of cast aside, didn't even become the news story. The news story was the fight over picking ANC mayoral candidates. Interesting that the ANC didn't bother to announce to us before the election who they would put forward for mayor. Only after the election did they come up with that. Maybe that's because their candidates are so rotten.
The ANC is absolutely rotten to the core, Chris. I mean, it's not just that they have a few rotten apples. You can look across the board. This is a party in crisis, in a moral and a principle and integrity crisis. I mean, you can see they're scrambling really to put out flames everywhere and fires. But then at the same time, I mean, we have to also take into account that it wasn't a breakout blockbuster election for the biggest opposition party, the DA, either. They pretty much stagnated around where they were. The little change in support that there wasn't really something to write home about. There was a big win for them in KZN with one of the municipalities there. But otherwise, they were pretty much still stagnant. But I do think I know why that is. And that's because the DA are unfortunately now currently in a recovery phase. They aren't where they were in the past. They had a even more disastrous election in 2019. There were so many leaks in that boat. They had to fix everywhere. They were scrambling to really keep their party from internally combusting. So they are currently still in that recovery phase. It was never going to take just a year or two for the party to get back on track. They seem to be doing the right things here and there, but then they're also making some mistakes that we can talk about if you want to. But really what I'm seeing with the DA is a party that's pretty much fighting for stability again. They're not fighting to gain a massive amount of support. They're fighting just to make sure that they stop the rot, if you can put it that way. And I think this election showed that.
No, I think that's fair. I think I think you're being overly kind. Let me explain from my perspective why I think you're being overly kind to the DA. But before we do that, let me welcome Mark Naidu in the program. Mark was a candidate for ward councillor in Pretoria for the UIM. Well, welcome, Mark. Good to see you there once again. But the reason I say I think you're being overly kind is, if we look at this objectively, what I've told people since I started pushing very hard to wake South Africans up to this election, which apparently I should stop doing that because less people went to vote, not more. But in June of last year, I started pushing and saying that South Africa's last hope was the 2020 municipal elections, an opportunity for opposition parties to get 50+1 wherever you can, so you don't have a coalition, so you can govern, be transparent, excuse me, be responsive to citizens' needs, and deliver governance. And if you find someone corrupt in your ranks, then you investigate them. If in fact they are, you expose them, you get rid of them, you prosecute them. This is your chance to show the South Africans you can make things work, because over half the population has never known anything except ANC rule, excluding the Western Cape, where the DAs had provincial rule for a time. But the African National Congress has been in power since 1994. Over half your population was born after that date. So they don't know anything but ANC rule. So here was a golden chance. I mean, look, the ANC couldn't have made this any easier. No cooked chicken, no e-commerce, locking people in their homes, arresting nursing mothers on the sidewalk, arresting people for surfing, because we all know
record unemployment.
Yeah, record unemployment, loss of the entire tourism sector collapse, which was a huge sector.
No consequences for state capture or corrupt officials.
Exactly. The list goes on and on. People out of the goodness of their heart donating food parcels to starving South Africans, and ANC corrupt officials threatening arrest and imprisonment for people donating food because they were out during lockdown, and then taking the parcels home and selling the food or consuming themselves. I mean, this couldn't have been. And then on top of all that, the internal insurrection within the African National Congress in July in KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng clearly showed this government's either not caring about South Africans or incapable of taking care of the country. So, I mean, it couldn't have been any easier. This should have been as simple. And here's the other thing. I've told people this all along, Ernst, is that in a municipal election, it's traditionally 31 to 38% of the eligible electorate actually vote. So it's a small portion of the voting population. In a smaller election, a smaller party has the advantage. You need fewer votes, actual votes, to win. It's the bottom line. And in the perfect example of this, the thesis I made on this is borne out by none other than the Freedom Front Plus. The Freedom Front Plus gained a small number of votes, a huge number in comparison to what they had in 2016, 115,000 to 276. But 276,000 votes out of 12 million cast is not much. Yet they went from 67 seats in councils to 221. And that's what this election should have been about. It should have been about capturing councils and capturing ward seats. And on the face of that, here, let me just, and I'll get in here real quick, but ANC lost 2.5 million votes, 32% of the votes they had in 2016. And people who say 2019 is not a viable measuring stick for this. The DA likes to fall on that too. You have to go to 2016. That's a municipal election. They're very different creatures. 2016, the ANC has lost 2.5 million votes. They only got 5.3 million voters. That's 32% of the votes. The DA, who's crowing about the ANC being below 50% when they're actually at 13% or 20%, depending how you view it, not 46%. They're crowing about that. The DA lost 37% of its voters, from 4,004,000 to 2.5 million. That's 37%. They lost control of multiple municipalities in the Western Cape. Yeah, so what that they won Umgeni? Hey, good for the residents of Howick. But they are putting lipstick on a pig. And anyway, I think you're too kind to them, as many analysts are in South Africa.
Well, Chris, there were definitely some small parties that did shock a lot of people. I mean, VF Plus's gains, I mean, a lot of people saw that. I think I'm not a fan at all of Good, but they did they did land some punches on the DA, putting the DA in some uncomfortable positions in quite a few areas. And then also the dark horse of this election, Herman Mashaba's Action SA, which actually shocked a lot of people. Only me and Mr. Wotan Zede really said that they're a party to watch, and that they might outperform expectations around them. Most people were saying they're going to be a 2%, 1% party. And I think Herman Mashaba and his party actually proved them wrong. What they're going to do now with their success, that's the big question. I can't predict that. We're currently in a very unpredictable coalition environment. Everyone is wheeling and dealing. Everyone is kissing everyone else's feet. It's a very irritating phase within the election cycle that we are now. This coalition fighting and all this very fake kissing up to each other, and I think that's one of the big mistakes of the DA as well that they made in the run up to the elections. They focused so much on attacking smaller parties and saying you shouldn't vote for these parties because X, Y, and Z, rather than focusing on why why you should vote for us, why we are the party that deserve your vote. Because now they should have known that there was going to be this massive fight for coalitions after the election, and now they have to kind of go crawling back to some of these smaller parties that they said are pretty much Lucifer incarnate. But at the same time, I mean, it's not the DA alone that went to these types of tactics. Many of these other smaller parties did as well. I think personally, just overall, it's a very short-sighted tactic. I don't like to see it, and I think it actually damages prospects for very valuable anti-ANC coalitions, which we now have opportunities abound. But unfortunately, a lot of those opportunities now are soured by that very cheap tactic that a lot of parties were reduced to.
No, I agree with you on that. But the sad thing about this is that any coalition with more than three partners is a fractious coalition. That's why,
that's true.
Quite frankly, Nelson Mandela Bay, where really the DAs, I mean, I don't know how they screwed the pooch so badly. I mean, it's shocking. They went from 45% in 2016. They went down to 40% this time, barely ahead of the ANC. Instead of, that's the one I got wrong. I predicted that they would take Nelson Mandela Bay, and that's the one I got wrong, and I'll admit that up front. But as far as Action SA, you and Odin weren't the only ones who made that prediction. I predicted and made a bet with Mark Oppenheimer that in Gauteng or in Joburg, they would take 20%. He said 10%. 16%, round up, winner, chicken dinner. So
no, good for you, Chris. Very well done. Very astute.
Well, but the problem from my perspective for Action SA is I don't really see much traction there beyond the personality of Herman Mashaba. He's already been the mayor of Joburg, and arguably his term was, I wouldn't say unsuccessful, but I wouldn't say successful either. And there are lots of excuses given by the DA, by Mashaba, by analysts about why it wasn't successful. But the bottom line is that it didn't go as well as Herman Mashaba thought it would go. And he is surviving, in my view, on his personality and on his fame because he's a well-known, successful businessman under apartheid and post-apartheid, self-made man, and a lot of respect for that. But his xenophobic comments and his race hustling are really becoming nauseating. And it's a bit frustrating to listen to. I know he's been a guest on your program a couple of times. I tried to get him my program, but it's quite vile to hear this constant race hustling goes on, attacking the DA. Well, when the DA starts treating black people better. Really? You were in the DA. You were the mayor of Joburg. And how did you treat black people when you're mayor? I'm not saying you treat them poorly or badly, but I mean, that's just unnecessary. It's gratuitous. I think, honestly, it might just be jockeying for position for the mayoral councils of Tshwane and of Joburg. But it's a bit frustrating. But I did predict that Action SA would do well, and they did better in Tshwane than I expected. I'll be honest there. They did very well. And they did about what I expected in Ekurhuleni. And I kind of wish they'd do better because Ekurhuleni is a real mess right now.
Oh, well done, Chris. Then I can also add you to that very small select group of people that actually had the foresight there. But what you say there is absolutely correct. I mean, South African politics, unfortunately, is very nasty. It's not something that's unique to South Africa. I mean, you have your fair share over there in the States.
Oh, yes.
But there's some unfortunate politicking that we see between specifically now the smaller parties. And that's why I voiced my frustration with this type of tactic. These attacks on the parties that you're competing with for votes, I mean, it makes sense in the short term. It's something that is very guttural. It's something that you very quickly jump to. It's a knee-jerk reaction. But if you look at the longer term, what South Africa needs now is an anti-ANC coalition. You're not going to be able to do that just on your own. It is now the age of coalitions. Coalitions are going to become more and more prominent in South Africa. That's not saying these coalitions are going to work or are going to be massive successes, as you rightly pointed out. More than three parties in a coalition, that's a recipe for disaster and a lot of infighting. But at the same time, as long as these parties that grew in support during this election don't go into coalition with the EFF or the ANC, that's a win for South Africa. And that's one of the things that I will commend Herman Mashaba on, is the fact that he is one of the few politicians his party was one of the few parties that came out and said they will not go into coalition with the ANC, which I think all these parties, DA and everyone included, should have taken that stance, said we're not going into coalition with an evil party. And Herman Mashaba is right when he calls the ANC the devil and saying he's not going to make a deal of the devil. And I actually want to see that from the DA. I want to see the DA come out and say we are not going to even give the devil the time of day. This is a party that has caused immense tragedy, destruction, and suffering in this country, and they don't deserve to be put back in power. Because any coalition with the ANC, they are still going to be the major player within that coalition, which means they're just going to bully you around. They're not going to listen to you. They're just going to use you as their tool to remain in power. You're not going to have a lot of influence on them. I don't buy that narrative that we can change them. We can have a good influence on them. No, you can't have a good influence on them. They're far gone. They're lost. They only look at power politics. They are a typical dictatorial party that just want absolute power and play for it, and they play hard for it. And that's how I summed it up the other day. Unfortunately, the ANC and the EFF want to rule, and the DA want to be liked, and that needs to stop. There are some people in South Africa that the DA shouldn't care about if they like them or not. That's what we saw of the whole posters debacle. The people that were making this hullabaloo about the posters that the DA put up in Phoenix, those people weren't going to vote for the DA anyway. Exactly. And then when the DA groveled and apologized, zero of those people accepted their apology, as we would have been able to predict and tell them. But no, they went on their knees, and they didn't get the response that they thought when they apologized and groveled and said. And what they also did through that cowardly action was they threw everyone, me included, that defended their posters and their action under the bus by pretty much admitting that, yeah, these posters are racist. Everything the ANC says about them is true. We're truly sorry. No, that's not the right way. When you know you're right, you know in your conscience and you know by your principles you are right, you never apologize. That's the message that the DA needs to understand. You don't apologize to evil. Apologizing and groveling to evil is immoral in itself. And that's what we saw here, unfortunately. And I think that also hurt the DA in the election. Not putting up the posters themselves, taking them down had a bigger impact, because that sent the message that the only thing that you need to do to make the DA dance to your tune is to just have a social media mob go after them and to call them racist. Then they're going to cower back and say, we're so sorry, please forgive us, we'll toe the line, we'll fall back in line. That's the message that they sent through that debacle, and that's the unfortunate thing. That's what's happening through that, because now, how can I trust, if they can't even stand up for a poster, how can I expect them to stand up when the heat really gets turned up on EWC and the ANC tells them, well, if you don't support EWC, you're a racist? What are they going to do then? What if some people are angry at them on social media for not supporting EWC? Are they going to apologize? Well, they apologize for a poster. Maybe they're going to apologize for something as massive as EWC as well. I don't know. They sowed that doubt themselves.
No, absolutely. You're right on. Now, the thing with the Phoenix posters, I thought they were bad form. I thought they were unnecessary, gratuitous, and that's what I said at the time. I don't think they were racist. I just think they were bad form, and I think it was done intentionally by some DA members to poke a hornet's nest because they knew they weren't going to get certain votes, but they were trying to get Indian votes. That's my view of it, and that was my view of the time. But the fact that Steenhuisen came out and defended it, and then a couple of days later they retracted like a bunch of cowards, showed just how weak the DA was. And that was just very stupid of them politically and morally. It was wrong. And as you said, rightly, it's just going to make it very difficult to take a moral stand in the future against things. Well, you have no credibility. That did severe damage to the party. It was very stupid of them to do that. But as far as, excuse me, as far as coalitions, I've been following this very closely with coalition talks before this election and since the election. And most of these parties have either been misrepresented by the press, or they've misspoken, or they've changed their position. So just a quick rundown on what I've observed. The Good Party has come out and said no coalitions. They'll sit in opposition everywhere. So they claim they won't be part of any coalition. And they haven't changed that position since after the election. They made no announcement before the election. The EFF has said that they will not do a coalition with the Democratic Alliance or the Freedom Front Plus. Okay, so what? Who cares? So big surprise. Anyway, so
please, no, come back.
Yeah, please come back. Yeah, exactly. Action SA said that they would meet with EFF, and they did meet with EFF, and would consider a coalition. And then they announced that they wouldn't hold a coalition. They tossed the EFF out, closed the door on them. I don't think they ever should have met with the EFF. I lost a lot of confidence in Action SA when their party even met with the EFF. How can you even meet with this race-based party that's full of hatred in their hearts and does nothing but destroy the country? It just, that was disturbing. Now, the DA in the press, they ran this thing from like 2019, an audio recording about, the party being a party of 20% or something like that. And then the Times Live claimed that they interviewed John Steenhuisen. In the interview, he said that they would go into a coalition, the ANC, where in some municipalities. Well, he came out immediately and denied that. And a week later, the Times Lab retracted that story, saying that their journalists misrepresented the facts. Well, that created all
misrepresented is a very kind way to put it.
Yeah, well, he lied. Anyway, so, but whatever the case is, but the DA has come out and said that they won't go into coalition anywhere with the ANC or the EFF. That's what they've said. Now, if they stick to that, a lot of people don't trust them to stick to that, but we'll see what happens. So 2 cases come out right now in the Western Cape where the DA has lost control of things. The first was in Cederberg, where I think the Cederberg residents are going to have good representation, in my estimation. First, the DA teamed up with the Cederberg Residents Association, which did incredibly well. They're the second largest polling party with about 27% of the vote, and with the Freedom Front Plus. And the DA, rather than argue for a municipality seat, mayor or deputy mayor, smartly sits back and says, we're part of the coalition. The Cederberg residents, they'll have their mayor. They'll get the mayor. And 11 seats on the council. So there's 6 with this coalition. So they'll get the mayor, and the Freedom Front Plus gets a deputy mayor. Well, the mayor is a former deputy director of the Scorpions. So I'm good. I think things could be good in Cederberg. We'll see what happens there. Now, we just saw in Knysna where there was a hung council. There's, I think, 11 votes, but someone must not have voted, 11 or 12 votes on the council, but it was 10-10 voting for mayor. The ANC candidate and the DA candidate. The DA got the most seats, but they didn't get a majority. So they've got to have a coalition. And they managed to get 2 votes because they have 8, but it's a deadlock right now, so they have to go back to the drawing board. But we're running out of time. The clock is ticking on coalitions. It's not much longer. These coalition governments have to be formed. But so far, we've only had 2 coalitions announced. One of them in wasn't Beaufort West, was it? I'm trying to remember. I think it was, but the one with the ANC and the Patriotic Alliance team, I think it was Beaufort West, and then the other is in Cederberg. But that's it. 2 out of 66.
I think I heard as well today. I don't know if it's completely confirmed, but the EFF and the IFP also negotiated some coalitions in KwaZulu-Natal.
That's very disturbing. Very disturbing. The IFP did not say they would not work with the EFF, but they did emphatically say, now we got to watch this because some people are going to come back on this, but Halabisa, the party leader whom I interviewed on my program, when he announced that they weren't going to go in any coalition discussions with the ANC in municipalities where they're leading. So I think a lot of people are coming back. If the IFP actually goes in a coalition in the southern part of KZN, in one of those places where the ANC has a lead, and they're coming back and saying, you guys lied. No, they didn't lie. You just didn't listen. I hope they don't do that, but the IFP said in places where they're in the lead, in other words, they polled the most, they had the plurality of votes, they won't go in a coalition with the ANC. I think they should have been more clear and said they won't go in at all, but that's kind of where we're at on coalitions, what parties said and not said. I haven't seen that about the EFF and the IFP, but if they've done that, that's incredibly disturbing. The EFF is a
I sent you a link to that story over WhatsApp.
Okay, thank you. But I hadn't seen that. I've been Oh, it's on Twitter. Okay. So, it's from News 24. Okay. Interesting. Well, I looked at News 24, but then I don't get the same feed. I have to go hunting and searching for terms in News 24 half the time because here on this side with my IP address, they feed me what they want me to see. And it isn't always the same thing you guys see. Door closed and coalition talks. Well, wait. Okay, this is a live feed. Okay, it must be further down. I'll look at it later on. But yeah, I'm looking at this right now. This is an updated elections page. 6 hours ago, they said the door was closed. 4 hours ago, here it is. EFF leaders conclude immediate briefing where he announced the EFF will not entertain any further talks to ANC. Okay, well that's not it. But the one you're talking about must be further down in the feed. So I'll find it later on. Anyway, but yeah, no, it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy what's going on here with this election. And I think that you've used the correct adjective there to describe what's happened here, and that's the one I used from the outset. I penned an article which Roman Kabanek put on his Morning Shot website, and I said lipstick on a pig or whistling past the cemetery, because these parties are doing exactly that. But the bottom line is exactly what I said in the article. This was an abysmal election turnout. And I don't understand the apathy in South Africa. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, how much more miserable do South Africans have to be before they go to the polls and vote against the ANC? Now, one can make the argument people did vote against the ANC. They lost 2.5 million votes, only got 13% of eligible voters, 20% of those who voted, and that is a statement against them. But then what do you say about the DA? They lost 37%, and they lost control of half the municipality. That's the idea was to gain control of municipalities. The DA lost half their municipalities in this election. Good Lord. That's not a good sign.
No, Chris, it's a very dire sign. But at the same time, I think if you will indulge me in some speculation,
sure.
I think the amount of South Africans that stay at home is also a symptom of a population that can't envision alternative to the ANC. They're pretty much stuck in this view of the ANC liberated us from apartheid. They're the only they will rule until, if I can use Jacob Zuma's own quote, until Jesus comes back. And I think a lot of South Africans are still stuck in that mindset. I think they view in South Africa, the government and the ruling party, or the ANC, those two concepts have merged together to form the same thing. When you talk about the government, you talk about the ANC. When you talk about the ANC, you're talking about the government. It's almost become synonymous. And I think that is definitely a problem. That's something that is causing a lot of people, when they get mad at the ANC, when the ANC treats them badly, the only option they can think of to punish the ANC is not ANC, because I think still a lot of South Africans still believe the ANC fear propaganda, that if the ANC lose power, apartheid's going to come back, their social grants are going to stop, and South Africa is going to be much worse than it was. And unfortunately, I think that's still the case. I think still a lot of South Africans still buy into that propaganda. Unfortunately, I think it still has a massive impact in South Africa, because the ANC still is very influential in regards to getting its message out there and having control over people's minds. So when it comes to this low turnout, I think that is the closest up until now we can get to a rebellion against the ANC, where in the past people would just reluctantly go vote for the ANC. Now they are staying home as their middle finger, or their rebellion against the ANC. It's unfortunate because it doesn't really bring about the change that's needed. But at the same time, that's how I would explain it. I think people have become just very, very disillusioned with politics in general, and with the whoever is in charge. But at the same time, I do think this is good for, as you explained earlier in the show, this is good for smaller parties. 2024 is going to be a massive election. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens there. But it might be an election that is characterized by a lot of chaos and violence. We're already seeing the ANC getting up to all kinds of shenanigans, even political killings on the up, ANC members being killed, people that took on the party or had disputes with the party just vanishing or being murdered. That's very concerning. And this is just in the lead up to a municipal election. What's going to happen when it's a national election, when it's really up for the real power is up for grabs? So unfortunately, my little bit of a grim prediction for 2024 is I think we're going to see a lot more violence. We're going to see a lot more factional chaos, and we're going to see a lot more dirty tricks from the ANC. And there's another worry that I also have, and that is with the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, that shouldn't have an I in it really anymore, because there's a lot of dodgy things going on there as well.
It still deserves an I. I renamed it a month ago to the Incontinent Electoral Commission.
Yeah, it was a if I can use the frank term, a shit show when it came to election day, Chris, this year.
Hence many the term problems. Incontinent.
Yeah. No, it was horrible to see. I mean, you have years to prepare for this election, and you still get caught with your pants down. And I mean, I'm at this point attributing it to incompetence, but I mean, I think a lot of it might even be able to be attributed to malice from what we saw on that day.
Well, I agree 100%. I had Mark Oppenheimer in the program a few months ago after Mosaneki's decision, or his rendering his report, and he sent it, and then they had this. They went to the Constitutional Court. And Mark was one of the advocates who spoke before the court, so he couldn't really talk about it still after it. But I said that I began to question whether Judge Mosaneki is being captured, and he adamantly defended Mosaneki, saying no, he's not captured, and I'll accept that. But what I won't accept is that the Independent Electoral Commission is independent. There's just too much anecdotal evidence without investigation. It needs to be a forensic investigation of what happened here, because they had 5 years to prepare for this election. They've had since March 27th of 2020 to know that this government was going to unconstitutionally lock down its population, and every 30 days has extended that now for 21 months in violation of the Constitution. By the way, former Chief Justice Mogoeng has just come out and said that, hey, that's in violation of the Constitution. He gave a specific reference to it. So that's something for lawyers to argue about, that they can't prepare. They're going to extend this lockdown for 3 months, and now they've gone into 21 months. But they waited until the clock almost ran out intentionally. They could have done the study by Mosaneki in January, February, March, April. No, they waited till June to have him come with these results and say, oh, we can't hold a free and fair election. It's impossible. There isn't time for the parties to campaign. First off, that's a false premise. The parties have had 5 years to campaign. And specifically, they've had since June of last year, when the lockdown restrictions were eased a bit, for people to campaign. If the parties didn't campaign, it's their fault. And you know what? It is their fault. They're all useless, every single one of them. None of them listened to my advice to campaign starting last year, getting out in hostels, townships, mining camps, rural areas, leafy suburbs, urban centers. They didn't do it. They wait until the announcement of the election, then they go out and start putting their stupid signs up and running around trying to get people to vote for them. And that's not how you campaign. Politics is a blood sport. You do it 365 days a year. You campaign all the time for your party. You bring people to your standard all the time. You don't wait until 6 days before election. That's why people are apathetic, because the parties don't engage them. The parties dismiss them, ignore them. They're all arrogant for the most part. Now that this election is over, once these council coalitions are solved, or if there's a revote, once that's over, you won't hear from most of these ward councilors unless you go to a city hall meeting. That's the only time you hear from them. And that's part of
and that's not even talking about the ANC that failed to register in so many areas, and the IEC just saving them there.
Well, three times. They missed 2 deadlines. One deadline was extended until 9 p.m. They violated. Then they gave it a couple of days later to do that. And then after the court forced them to have the election against their desire, then they opened the window up again. So the ANC had 90 councils in which they had no ward candidates whatsoever. They would have lost 90 towns. This would have been completely different. This is an invalid election from that standpoint. Someone ought to make the legal case on that. I mean, there's so much going on here. So they intentionally tried to run the clock out. The court said, no, you must follow the Constitution. And good on the court. That's good, following the rule of law. Nice to see that happening in South Africa. But then they do this nonsense where they open the window back up. Then on election day, I had people who were viewers on my channel, went out to vote during the special voting on the weekend, went to a retirement facility in Finbos Park in Hermanus, and 80% of the people who were there were turned away, despite having text or having a printout to show that they would register to vote in that polling station. They didn't have them on the rolls. They didn't update rolls. They moved people to different rolls. They played all kinds of shenanigans here. Now, that might be incompetence, but there's clearly some malice going on here. And the Incontinent Electoral Commission really needs to be looked at very hard, if not just disbanded altogether and replaced by another body, because this entire election is in so many ways, quite frankly, not just disappointing, but a sham.
Now, Chris, now that you mention the state of disaster and lockdowns, AfriForum actually this week announced a new campaign related to that, and that's we're challenging the curfew regulations. That's part of the state of disaster. Now, the thing is, at the moment, the state of disaster has already been extended, and taking on the state of disaster now in court, that's going to be a very long affair. But they haven't reinstated curfews, but because the state of disaster is currently in place, they can instate a curfew whenever they want. That's probably going to be around December if we look at the past on how waves worked. So at the moment, we are challenging the ANC, specifically Dlamini Zuma, on the curfew regulations. We've written, our legal team has written a letter to them asking them to give us the data that they based this policy on, and also to bring an end to it. But now we're going to wait for a response. They have until, I think, somewhere in November to reply. I think the 19th of November, if I remember correctly. If they don't reply, we're taking them to the Equality Court to put a stop to this type of policy before they enact it somewhere in December. Our legal team is feeling very confident about it. And that's what we're doing on that front. And then also something else that we're currently busy with is when it comes to farm security, all our what's it called? Neighborhood watches are still going forward. There's new neighborhood watches being established all across the country. And then as well, something that goes with all these campaigns that we're doing, there's also this project or this new think tank that we launched, Upinor, where we are putting out the latest type of thought related to community self-sufficient solutions for Africa specifically. And we're inviting many, specifically young people, to write pieces for us in regards to achieving this. We also published through Upinor just a few weeks ago a report written by Robert Daigen or Marubane on civil disobedience, how it should be done, what the theory says about it, and what tactics work and what doesn't. So that's also something that I think is going to be very useful, specifically when it comes to causes like Cape Independence or even standing up to the ANC itself.
So Marubani is working with AfriForum. Well, I didn't get my phone call. I feel very, very insulted. Very insulted.
He works for Wipinor, the think tank. So he technically works for AfriForum, but he's a researcher now at Wipinor.
Gotcha. Well, he's back from the Netherlands, and his postgraduate work. Well, here's another story. So back to but before I do that, first you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel, part of the Indaba Broadcasting Network. It is, Tuesday, the 16th of November. That's right, 16th of November, 2021. My special feature guest is Ernst Van Zyl, the Conscious Caracal. We're talking about the elections in South Africa, the aftermath, as well as some cases ongoing and efforts by AfriForum, the civil rights organization in South Africa, to change the narrative and make life better for South Africans. But here's one, very quickly, Ernst. We heard Deputy Chief Justice Moseneke say that it wasn't safe to hold free and fair elections, or they couldn't do it because of the campaigning, but also because the fourth wave would be hitting South Africa in October. I don't know what Sangoma he consulted, or which doctor, or which bones he was tossing around, but how does he know that the fourth wave is going to hit in October in the election? He didn't. That was all just made up lies. Now, I myself have voted in 3 different elections during the pandemic without facial coverings, without contracting the bug. So that's a lie. You can obviously hold elections. Somaliland, Central African Republic, Namibia, Zambia, all held elections. 115 countries, 117 countries around the world had elections. So that's total nonsense. So that's the first thing. Now, here's the next thing. You haven't heard this anywhere in the mainstream media. We did hear this last week. It's coming now. We're going to have the super spread event because everybody voted. Guess what? It's 2 weeks in a day since the election in South Africa, and the numbers have gone nowhere. There's no upward trajectory on infections, no upward trajectory on fatalities in South Africa. It's holding the same. It had been declining. It's pretty much the same level. So once again, fake nonsense used to defraud South Africans of their right, their constitutional right to vote. Utter nonsense. The fourth wave, I predicted, would be if the ANC got a bloody nose, and they're going to do it out of spite. Once the coalition talks fail, then they're going to do it out of spite. Then we're going to go from level 1 adjusted to level 3 adjusted, and you'll be suffering again because it serves the needs of the ANC. I'm being facetious in that last prediction, but I wouldn't be surprised if it comes true. But it's been 2 weeks. Where's the surge? Oh, where's the super spreader event? Total manure. So I'll tell you what. I'll tell you the super spreader event. Justin Bieber's coming to South Africa. Let's get everybody to go to his concert. Then you have your super spreader event.
Absolutely, Chris. But yeah, we're going to be taking on the state of disaster one egregious policy at a time, because there have been, from other organizations, challenges against the state of disaster itself in the past, and those have failed. So AfriForum is taking the approach of chipping away at it one policy at a time. Our big focus is the curfew, which they are definitely going to, if there's ever a surge in cases again, the ANC is definitely going to engage, or are going to enact that egregious curfew. So maybe just a final point on that. The things that AfriForum requested in our letter, I have it here in front of me now. So firstly, we requested from the Minister, Dlamini Zuma, to be provided with written reasons why there are curfews, as well as supporting evidence that curfews are an effective precautionary measure against COVID-19. Number 2, to be provided with the documents and supporting documents, expert reports, evidence, and data which supports the decision to enact curfews. And thirdly, that the implementation of national curfews be ceased with immediate effect. So the ANC have until the 19th of November to respond. If they don't, we are taking them to the Equality Court, and that's going to be very interesting. That should be, and this is not I'm talking under correction, but if we are going to court, it should be somewhere in December. So it should be somewhere early in December that court case then will start. So that's an interesting thing there on that front. But at the same time, all our other operations, when it comes to what AfriForum does, when it comes to neighborhood watches, farm patrols, cleaning up streets, filling potholes, painting street signs, all that is still going ahead. Every month we have more people helping out, more members. We are currently very close to 300,000 members. We are at 291,000 members at the moment, I think, which is absolutely phenomenal. And that also makes us, like I've said earlier or on previous podcasts, that makes us the largest civil rights organization based on members in the Southern Hemisphere, which is very nice, because it sounds like a cliche, but it's true. Without our members' support, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing, because the thing is, all those members, you can't just click a button and become a member. You become a donor to AfriForum. You give your monetary support through becoming a member. You get all other types of perks for it. So it's not just your money that you're giving. You also get a lot of benefits with that. But at the same time, that type of support that we get, that monetary support, makes it possible what we're doing. that makes all these types of campaigns possible. That's how we can pay someone like Harry Nel to take on a lot of these challenges and to be the head of our private prosecution unit, for example. It's really exciting to be part of this type of organization. And it's been a busy few weeks, a few months actually, in the lead up to the election and afterwards, because people are looking towards people like me and people like you for some clarity and analysis. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about, as we have already covered on the show.
No, there's quite a bit. There's a few comments I want to bring in from the chat, but before I get
go for it.
Before I get to those. So a couple things. Number one, I am not a member of AfriForum, and the reason I've never become a member is so I can remain independent and objective reporting, so I don't have to give a disclaimer all the time. Same reason years ago I didn't become a member of the DA abroad. DA have abroad. You could support their party. At the time, I was much higher on the DA before it became what it seems to be now. And then I'm not talking about the leadership. I'm actually okay with the DA leadership. Steenhuis and Zyl I have no issues with. But I will predict this for you, Ernst. You will be going to trial in December. The ANC will not produce those documents because they don't exist. There's no scientific evidence. They don't exist. They're just making it up. We've consulted with our scientists and we determined that the best approach. Yeah, right. Yeah, toss those bones. Yeah, you didn't consult with anybody. So there's no documents. You're going to court. Now, Vutsark a little while ago said, I voted for Freedom Plus in previous municipal elections. They went on to win 0 seats. Not making that mistake again. I'm not really sure what you're talking about, Vutsark, unless you meant seat in your council. Maybe that's what you're talking about. But the Freedom Plus won 67 seats in 2016.
Yeah, that actually did very well.
Well, in 2016, they got 67 seats. And in 2021, they got 221 seats. They took their vote total from 115,000 to 276. Now, Ernst, I should mention for some audience that are tuning in, might not have been here, but I'm constantly getting people trying to correct me going, no, they got 500,000 votes. They didn't get 500,000 votes. You got to stop being hoodwinked by the way votes are reported in South Africa. You got 2 ballots. You got a ballot for ward council. You got a ballot for a party. That's not 2 voters. That's 1 person voting twice. You can't count 2 votes. So you count the ward council votes because that's most people vote for a ward council. There's always more of those votes than the others. So that's the actual number of voters who went there, plus spoiled ballots. So that's how you get it. They got 276,000, which is impressive. Very impressive. But so I'm not really sure what Vutsark was talking about. Maybe they just didn't do it in his ward and he just didn't win his council. But they've won seats. 67 to 221. I don't care what metric you use. That's impressive. That's a 338% gain. That's pretty impressive. But so anyway, lots going on with court cases in South Africa. And I've been heartened by court decisions of late. For instance, the Constitutional Court upholding the Supreme Court of Appeals decision against UNISA about its racist discrimination against the Afrikaans language, making them reinstate it. That was a brilliant victory. Was AfriForum involved in that as well?
Yes, that was AfriForum's case, the UNISA case. And then also there was that tourism industry case against the Department of Tourism that we won as well. We got those 2 court victories in the same week. It was a very, very nice week for AfriForum then, those 2 very big wins against evil.
Yeah, I think the tourism case was the one that maybe that had Jacques Brudrick come on. It was a breaking story.
Yes, yes.
We talked about that day. But those are great results. It restored my faith, and that plus the Concord saying no, you will hold election. Just like Meghan Trainor, my number is no. You got to let it go. No, it's you've got those 3 court decisions restored some faith in the court process. Last year, I was torn both ways because the North Gauteng High Court said that the tourism decision was constitutional. And I'm like, what? How can that be constitutional when you only give money to people based on their skin pigmentation? That is the very essence of racism. Especially the money came from private donations plus money loaned to the South African government. So when they said that, but then they just before that, they declared most of what Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma's National Coronavirus Command Council did as unconstitutional. By the way, that decision was in June of last year. These decisions remain unconstitutional, yet they still implement them, and the ANC still appeals this decision, and we have not had a court case to resolve this issue. That is an issue that should have gone straight to the Constitutional Court and should have been resolved, and it all should have been thrown out. And so hopefully your case will be another nail in the coffin of ANC totalitarian rule.
No, absolutely. But like I said, Chris, we're feeling very good about it. We wouldn't have taken on this case if we didn't have a solid one there. And from what I've heard, we definitely have a solid case. So I'm going to be reporting on that case very closely. People can check out my Twitter around that time. I'll keep people up to date if we're going to court. Your prediction is we are. I tend to agree with you. But we'll see. But I think that there's a very strong chance. But yeah, Chris, there's a lot of bad things going on in South Africa, but there's also things that give you hope. People standing together to help their communities, people out of the goodness of their heart, helping each other out, supporting organizations that are fighting for their rights, people coming together to, like, for example, in this municipal election, people coming together to form these little, not really political parties, but like residents forums to contest in their local elections. I think that's very admirable to see, and I commend every single one of those people. And then also, being at AfriForum, I see the things happening on the ground. I get constant intel on what's going on. And even though people are financially struggling and the lockdowns are really hitting people hard now, they are still coming out to support their community. They're still coming out to give money for the less fortunate. People are still helping the less fortunate to them and the needy around them. And it's really something that gives you some hope in dark times. And it gives you a little bit of brightness and a little bit of a silver lining, in contrast to the absolute devastating malicious evil from parties like the ANC and people within it, and from parties like the EFF. These aren't just people that are misunderstood. These are parties that are genuinely evil, and that's why, like I said earlier, that's why I commend Herman Mashaba for being one of the few politicians to call the ANC the devil, what they really are. And I wish more parties would do that. But in contrast to that, human good is still shining through even in these dark times, and it's very heartening to see, and it motivates you and it inspires you at the same time.
Well, what you're speaking to is the nature and character of South Africans, black, white, and brown. They are actually amazing people with lots of spirit and determination. I mean, the history of South Africa, groups wouldn't have survived if they hadn't had such determination in the face of everything. And whether it was Bantu colonization, European colonization, British colonization, it was concentration camps during the Second Boer War, whatever it was. South Africans of all stripes have always had this unbound spirit. And some of that's interesting because it reflects the character of America in some ways. It's a very similar kind of trajectory and path with some of our history. And you're speaking of the very nature of South Africans, and that's why I find South Africa a fascinating place. The politics is absolutely acidic, but the reality is that the people are wonderful. I mean, that's I don't just empty-handed promote the culture of Afrikaans and of the Tshwane speaking people and the Basotho people. I don't just do that for the heck of it. I do it because I share an affinity with those three groups in particular, with South Africans in general. And it's an amazing place. It's just really a shame that it's run by a cabal of corrupt, it's our turn to eat, steal everything you can, lie, racialize, bifurcate, and divide society so we can stay in control. And they don't care about black South Africans. They lie. They claim they do. If they cared about black South Africans, then after 27 years, the education system wouldn't be worse than it was when they took over in 94. It's demonstrably worse. I mean, how can you have a system in which you tell a student that you can go to university if you have the right skin pigmentation if you get 30% in maths or in sciences? I mean, what is that? 2 subjects, 30%? That's ridiculous. The passing grade in most normal places is 70%. Anything below that, you don't make the mark. You don't fix things by creating artificial standards to elevate people for things they're not prepared for. You actually retard and hinder their process or their progress. And that's really, that's the story of the ANC, aside from the theft.
Yeah, Chris, no, it's an incredible country. And on that note of it being an incredible country, I do follow the comments in your chat, and I see a lot of people talking about immigrating, and that's your personal decision. But at the same time, I'm not going to immigrate. I'm going to stay here. My ancestors have been here for 9 generations since 1688. And I feel like that's my calling is here in South Africa. I was put here for a reason. Otherwise, I would have been born in the Netherlands or in France or in Germany. And it's very nice to be living a life where I am, I think, from how I understand God's plan for me, living out that calling. And it's very nice. And I did actually do an interview with Mr. Roman Kabanak on my channel a few months ago on that question about immigration, on whether to leave or whether to stay. You can find it on my channel. It's called Why Don't You Just Immigrate? And then also I did a more recent chat with the brilliant Russell Lamberti about digging trenches, now metaphorical trenches. And his message within that interview was as well that the water is going to continue to rise, whether you live in South Africa or anywhere in the West or wherever. We are living in dark times, and you can't just flee to higher ground every time the water rises. Somewhere you're going to have to dig a trench. Somewhere you're going to have to make a stand. If you choose to immigrate to another country, you have to do that for the reason of immigrating somewhere where you're going to be digging a trench. For me, my trench is being dug in South Africa. This is where I choose to dig my trench because the majority of my people can't leave South Africa. The majority of Afrikaners don't have the luxury of being able to leave, and I also feel that I do have a responsibility to help them and to help my people, as well as a responsibility to my ancestors in regards to how long they were here and the suffering that they went through for me to have this privilege to live in Africa. And I mean, this is something that a lot of people get quite worked up about when I say it, but I'll say it anyway. It is an incredible privilege to have been born in Africa. It's an incredible continent. It's a scary continent sometimes. It's a continent really fraught with danger. But at the same time, you won't find a more beautiful place anywhere else in the world. You won't find a place with these types of people that you encounter in Africa anywhere else. And you won't experience the type of experiences that you get here anywhere else. And I wouldn't trade that for anything. But that's my personal choice. If your personal choice is to leave or to immigrate, I'm not going to call you a coward or attack you for it or shame you, mock you for it. That's your choice. And I know it's a difficult choice because staying behind is a difficult choice. I just ask the same type of understanding from those that have immigrated or plan to immigrate, understanding for people like me that choose to stay. And when it comes to my place in South Africa, I feel my place and my calling here is to make life better for those people here, the people that stay behind, and to help build here. I mean, we're building universities, we're building infrastructure, we're building institutions. AfriForum and Solidarity, the entire Solidarity movement, our entire philosophy is fight and build. We fight evil, but we also build for future generations. And we are building, and our hands are bleeding from all the building that we're doing. And it's very inspiring to see, and it's very fulfilling to be part of that. And that's my calling, and that's all my colleagues at AfriForum's calling as well, is to be builders in a time where everyone's breaking down and everyone is destroying. Be a builder. And that's actually also an episode I had on my channel, my last stream. I just talked about the virtues of building and planting and creating. Use your God-given talents. If you can paint, make music, if you can work, you can mold wood, or you're a carpenter, or your talent is to garden or botany, use that talent to create. Don't just focus on breaking down, destroying, defacing. That's what the modern world wants you to do. That's what people are told will make them happy. Destroy what you hate, attack. But that's not true. What will make you happy is when you build, when you create, when you plant. Me and my girlfriend planted a vegetable garden a few weeks ago, and it was one of the funnest things I've ever done this year. And it's growing very nicely. Last night, we took some of the herbs that we planted and put it on our sandwiches. Some of the other vegetables are coming along very nicely. And I encourage anyone to try it. If you're not going to be planting a vegetable garden, paint or make music. Do whatever you have a talent for, because all your listeners have a talent for something creative. And I encourage them to use it. Even if you don't think you're a Picasso or like a Mozart, you don't have to be. Just create something. And then also an important ingredient is you create something, but you also share it. That's part of the human experience. You need to share it with other people, even if it's not the best painting or the best piece of woodwork that's ever been made. It's never going to be perfect. And if you wait till it's perfect, you're never going to show it to the world. And that's very sad and tragic. Show your talents to the world, share it with other people, and use it because it was given to you for a reason. And that's the very long-winded way of explaining why, even though a lot of people in your chat are talking about immigration, why I'm going to stay put here at the southern tip of Africa.
Well, when my channel was blowing up last year, a lot of people were asking me as an American, what were my thoughts about them leaving South Africa? And I said that if you're thinking of leaving South Africa, that's tragic. It's sad that you should feel the need to do that, and that you need to be cognizant of the fact that immigration is not as simple as jumping on a wooden sail ship and arriving on the shores of an uncharted and largely unpopulated space somewhere around the globe. You're moving to a place that has existing institutions, existing laws, and they have requirements. And also, in many respects, you're likely headed for cultural genocide. Your culture will die with your generation if you move to another place. If you're willing to surrender your culture then it's something to consider. But it doesn't come without cost. It comes with true cost, financial, mental, culturally. It comes with all those things. America is predominantly the largest ethnic group that immigrated to this country is Germans, and Germans make up over 40% of America's population. People who have some German ancestry. At one time, it was almost half. It's in some numbers say 38%. But whatever the case, it's the largest group. But aside from the Amish, no one speaks German. I have German ancestors. I didn't grow up speaking German. I didn't go to German churches. I wasn't part of German singing choirs. I wasn't affiliated with a brewery. I didn't do German Oompa parades and things like that. That was all alien to me.
Yeah.
It all became part of American culture. And if you think you can come to America and live in Arizona and you're going to bring your braai with you, great. That's fun. When you die and your kids.
If your culture is just braai.
Well,
if that's your culture.
I'm being facetious, but you get my point. But no, it comes with a cost. And frankly, right now is a horrible time to immigrate. The world is ruled by totalitarian fascists. There was a time you'd go to America or Canada or Australia. Australia is a penal colony. New Zealand is ruled by a horse-headed jackal who locks people in hotels and puts cops around there like a leper colony so they won't escape, and then lies to the world. I've conquered COVID. No, you moron. You've conquered liberty. That's all you've conquered. They've got plenty of COVID in New Zealand. Wake up. Canada, Bojo in the United Kingdom. The entire planet is ruled by fascists. These are jackals who are wearing sheep's clothing, and they're actually wolves, and they're pretending to be something they're not. Now, here in America, they're not pretending. We know they're leftists, and they're proud of it, and they're running all over the Constitution on a daily basis. But immigrating somewhere around the world today, unless you're going to the Faroe Islands or, I don't know, Greenland, I don't know what your prospects are. So I don't encourage people to ever immigrate, but if they do, I don't castigate them for doing it because everyone's got a personal decision. I mean, listen, if you're a member of a family, which I know, which lost 3 members who were murdered, one shot in a cash and transit heist, another shot in a farm invasion, and a third person who was stabbed to death in a brawl. And then you've had your siblings gang raped. You might consider moving out of South Africa. I'd understand your reasons for that. And I couldn't fault you. Famously, I was in Paris at the Charles de Gaulle airport. Our flight to South Africa was delayed back in 2001. And this is 2001. It's only 7 years after the new democracy. And I was talking to these Americans. They were asking me because we're all going to South Africa, and they knew I'd been there before. And they said, "So what's it like?" I said, "Oh, it's a great country. It's a fantastic place. Lots of wonderful people. But you got to keep your spidey sense about you. That hair on the back of your neck, if it starts to raise, something's not right. Trust your judgment. Because here's the thing. It can be a very dangerous place, too, if you're not aware of yourself and your surroundings." And it's all like, "Oh, no, don't listen to him. He don't know what he's talking about. He's just embellishing." And then they start telling the story. "Oh, yeah, the scar here, that's when I got stabbed in the calf this over here is when I got shot. See the scar? I got shot when they invaded my home." Every single South African there's like a dozen of them, all have been robbed, carjacking attempts, home invasions, shot. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. There's no danger. There's no crime in South Africa. Anyway, that's anecdotal, but the point is that anybody that feels the need to immigrate, it's on them, but it's really sad to see them leave their country, whether it's Tswana or they're Zulu or they're Xhosa or they're Afrikaner.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And something that I see a lot of people also comment that it's safer in a lot of these countries. And you also talked about how dangerous South Africa is, and that's true. But at the same time, the problem is there are other types of costs to different types of countries. For example, Australia is a lot more draconian than South Africa when it comes to COVID regulations. And the other thing is, if you look at, let's just take my own ancestors as an example, the ancestors of Afrikaners. When the Afrikaners trekked out of the Cape into the unknown, they weren't trekking towards safety. They were trekking into danger. They were leaving the Cape behind. If they stayed in the Cape, where the English had taken over, they would have had better schools for their children, better opportunities, much safer. They wouldn't be going into the unknown, an uncharted piece of land that they don't even know. They wouldn't have been just walking into the bush. They would have had a very comfortable life. The voortrekkers weren't poor people. The vast majority of them were well off. They were farmers. They had farms. They had property. They owned property in the Cape. They were living very nice lives, relatively. But they chose to give up all those earthly possessions. They gave up all those opportunities that would come with British rule. They gave up all the safety that would come with that, and went into the unknown, into danger, because they wanted to protect their culture and they wanted to be free. And they didn't want to live under the thumb of the British government and under the British imperialism. They would rather trek into the unknown than have their children be anglicized and turn into little British anglicized kids and lose their culture and their heritage. And they did that because they loved their culture. And as you said earlier, if everyone immigrates, there won't be Afrikaners anymore. The culture will die out. You can't forbid, if you immigrate, you can't forbid your children from marrying locals there. You can't say to your children, just marry Afrikaners or Afrikaans speaking people. That's very cruel. You can't do that. But that means that eventually your culture will slowly fade away like a tea bag in the ocean. And that's the thing. And that's why I look at the Voortrekkers as an example of people that, even though they had safety and opportunities if they stayed in the Cape, they trekked into danger and into the unknown and put themselves and their families at risk, but for something bigger than themselves, something that not something they created, something that was created for them, their culture and their community. And they wanted to protect that and preserve it because they couldn't put a price on it. And many Afrikaners here today still feel like that, where they can't put a price on their culture and their community and their identity. Yeah, it's something that's hard to explain. But
I don't think it's hard to explain at all. I think you explained it well, and I think I explained it well. It's pretty easy to understand if people take a moment to grasp it. I mean, look at the famous community of Trek Boers, bitter enders who refused to accept British rule, who migrated to Argentina a century ago. They're all gone. I mean, their descendants are there, but they don't speak Afrikaans. They're not Afrikaners. And that community is absorbed. And look at the Trek Boers who did the same, and for some strange reason went to Kenya, even though it was a British colony. They've blended in. There's no Afrikaner culture there. It's the reality. Let me get a couple super chats here real quick. Brett gave us a super chat saying the UK is safer than South Africa, though. Well, that's true, Brett, but just avoid Leicester and the East End of London, and that's probably a true statement.
And also avoid Rotherham.
Yeah, that's another place. Oh, yeah, Rotherham. That's another place to wait. And then Brett says corruption is less an issue in Australia and New Zealand. Yeah, but I don't want simply an uncorrupt government. I want a government that doesn't oppress my liberty. A government that understands that it exists because I allow it to exist, not because I exist because they allow me to exist. Polities create governments to meet their collective needs, not the other way around. Governments didn't create you. Governments weren't there when your parents were knocking boots. Okay, do it faster. Make sure you're quick. Oh, hurry up. Okay, good. Okay, the egg's fertilized. Okay, now they're baby 9 months and it belongs to us. That's not why governments exist. Governments exist to address our collective needs, and we form governments. Now, maybe not any of us alive today, but our ancestors formed these polities to meet our collective needs, and it's not the other way around. These demonic leftists, these sick, twisted people who seem to think government is the answer. Ernst was talking about something earlier, inadvertently, he was talking specifically about something, but inadvertently addresses my point here. Solidarity has built a technical school, a college-like facility, because the needs of South Africans aren't being met by government. And they didn't get any money from government. They didn't charge people. They didn't make any loans. They took small donations, and they brought it online, under budget, on time. In fact, it was finished early, all done in the private sector. Now, that's proof that we don't need governments, except for things like policing, courts, and national defense.
I know, Chris. There's some countries that I really lost a lot of respect for during specifically now this whole COVID hysteria. The entire Anglosphere has lost its mind.
It has.
We're seeing things in Australia, Canada, New Zealand that if you had told me this is what's going to happen 5 years ago, I would have laughed in your face and said, it's not possible to get that bad. Don't talk shit to me.
Exactly.
But it did, and it's getting worse. And people aren't doing anything about it. In Australia, people will have like a protest. The government will go in hard, beat the living daylights out of them, and then the protests stop because people don't want to die. And people don't want to be maimed from going to a protest. And those governments are keeping their populations in line through any means necessary. And it's very, very frightening and disturbing stuff to see. And here in South Africa, at least, the big bonus is that you have an incompetent government. So doesn't matter how draconian their dreams might be, they can't implement them. They can't possibly implement them. So that's one of the things.
I suppose that is the saving grace in South Africa's ANC is not only thieving, but they're also incompetent and feckless. And so that has been a saving grace. Otherwise, things could be demonstrably worse than they actually are, which is hard to imagine, but true. A couple comments here. Lee Roberts, he says, your children stay your children, even if they marry British American, whoever. It's true, Lee, but you're missing the point. We're not suggesting that. What we're talking about is your culture dies. If you value your culture, And I value my culture. Look, English isn't our language. We borrowed English in America. You know, there was a discussion about whether to adopt German as our official language because almost half the population was German speaking when it became an independent country. You know, Pennsylvania had more German-speaking residents than English speakers, and our capital was in Philadelphia, and that's in Pennsylvania. So you know, this is about your culture. If your culture matters you, you're going to be awash in a sea of others. Okay, let's say U.S. Bürgermeister Renee, she's an Afrikaner who's immigrated to America some time ago, and she says her son can't speak Afrikaans, but he understands when she's angry. Okay, great, I get that. She's being funny, but so when he has kids, they're not going to be Afrikaans speaking. They may be of Afrikaans origin, but Afrikaans is a unique blend of cultures from Dutch to Cape Dutch, the Malay, Germans, French Huguenots, all who came there and formed this unique culture. You know, it's really sad to see a culture die off. I recently, and nobody watched this, it really irritates me, the shadow ban on YouTube, because I thought this is a very useful thing. I did a video talking about the new language, which is a Khoi language spoken in the Western Cape. And there's only one speaker of the language left in the world. She's 88 years of age in failing health, and she's the only first language speaker of the language. It's about to die off. Now, she's tried to teach, and her granddaughter is a proponent for it, and she can speak it. But I mean, this 88-year-old woman was a domestic worker and did some other work. It's not like she was a university scholar or even a folklore teller, you know, a storyteller within her tribe or her group. So it's not like she had the entire vocabulary of the language that she mastered on her own. So she's only able to relate the bit that she knows, which is a fair amount. So part of it's already lost. And even if that bit is saved and continued, it's going to be changed by English or Afrikaans or something as they bring words in for new technology and stuff in the future. It's really sad to see a culture die off. And there are a lot of languages like this. Africa is at risk of losing thousands of languages in the next 50 years because so few speakers out there. But when you move intentionally to another place, you have to accept that it's highly unlikely that you're going to speak German. Now, in our case, my German ancestors were very stubborn. The Germans came over in 1848, and all the way up until the First World War, they still spoke German. Their children, their grandchildren, they were still speaking German. They learned it in the home. Now, the only other group in America that does that is the Amish and some Mennonites. But the reason they stopped speaking German is because of the First World War. Germans were demonized. They were ostracized. And even though over 40% of the population was of German extraction, they were still treated like pariahs. So everyone, all the singing choirs and the German language newspapers, all that disappeared during or at the end of the First World War. If you look at the gravestones of my ancestors buried in Baltimore, everything's in German to the 1850s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 1900, 1910, 1918. Suddenly it's partial German, usually the biblical inscription. The rest is in English. And by the 1930s, only the dates are written in German. You know, like 30 October, the OKT, not OCT, because they probably made a mistake because the guy carved the stone was German. But by the 1940s, it's all in English. The culture died. I didn't even know I had German ancestors and I was born in the 60s. I didn't know that until I became a genealogist and did research on it. That's a sad, sad thing. If your culture matters to you. My culture matters to me. I'm an American. You know, my culture is not McDonald's and the Kardashians. That's not my culture. That's what the world sees as American culture. That's not. America is an open society, a friendly society where people greet you and they welcome you. And that's a part of our culture. I value that. And I don't want to see it go away. And so people should protect their culture. I think that's right.
Yeah, and Chris, maybe a final thought there. Because I love my culture and don't want to see it die out, I also don't want to see other cultures around me die out. I want people to still be speaking Zulu and Tshwane in 100 years. I still want there to be Chongas and Vendas in 100 years. That's why I do my culture series on my channel, to do my little bit to inspire people to look into their culture and see what of value there is. Impie van Wyk Louw, the Afrikaner philosopher, said, our culture is our special treasure that we have to carry through the crowd. And that's something that I think people need to understand when it comes to culture, is that your culture, you take it for granted until the day that it's gone, and then you realize in its absence what value it had for you. And I'm not willing to see my culture die out, and that's why AfriForum and the Solidarity Movement have all these initiatives to rejuvenate Afrikaner and Afrikaans culture, and to make sure that this language, specifically Afrikaans, survives to the benefits of all Afrikaans speakers in South Africa. And that's the thing. I want other cultures to survive as well. I don't want the world to be a monoculture. I don't want everyone to just mesh together into like a gray goo of non-identity. I want there to still be in 100 years Germans and French and Americans and Zulus and Tswanas and Xhosas and Vendas it's the cultures of the world are all the instruments in God's symphony. And if one of those cultures dies out, that's one instrument in that symphony that's never going to play again. It's a worldview and a perspective on the world and an interpretation of our beautiful world that goes silent forever. And that's a very tragic thing. It's a crime against humanity, if you can even put it that way.
No, it's a great statement. Brett had another super chat here. He said, Afrikaans seems an easy language to pick up. Cool language. I wouldn't say it's easy. The pronunciation is brutal. I speak German and English, and I self-taught myself Afrikaans. I can read it and understand it, but maar ek praat nie Afrikaans nie, because the pronunciation is just tough. I've got to spend about 3 months with those boers out there on a farm in Northwest or something like that, and then my pronunciation will be good. But short of that, it's a bit tough. Let's see. There was and Brett says, if a white South African is half English descent and half Afrikaner descent, what are they considered? Asking because he doesn't know. It's a good question, actually, Brett. It depends on the family. It depends on the family.
Yeah. It depends also on that individual, on how they view themselves within the culture. I mean, you can be 10% Afrikaner, but if you embrace the culture fully and you adopt all the values and you speak the language and you adopt the worldview and the values of that culture, you're also an Afrikaner. Yep. That's, for example, what you saw. That's the whole philosophy of Urania, where if you move to Urania, you don't have to do a DNA test to show that you're like an ancestor of the Voortrekkers. You just have to adopt the values and the structure of the community. You have to slot into a church there. You have to speak the language. You have to become part of the community and become part of the culture. You embrace the culture. Just like you open your heart to Christianity, you also open your heart to a culture. You let it in and you embrace it and becomes part of you. So I think, I can't remember who said it, but someone once said, whenever you're confronted with a question of what is X, what is American culture, what is Afrikaner culture, you just have to look at, for example, like a nation like the Jews. They are a nation without a concrete definition that has existed for 3,000 or what years. But when you ask a Jew if he is one, he will very, very solidly have an answer for you. You won't think about it. And the same goes for Afrikaners. If you're an Afrikaner, you know it. It's just something you know. It's not something you have to go do like a test for. And it's something where you embrace the culture itself and you live it out. Being an Afrikaner is reflected in your actions and your life. It's reflected in your very being. And that's, I think, applies to any culture.
Yeah, no, it's some people say the example the Jews are using would refute the argument that I made, that we're both making, that your culture can be extinguished. But the Jews are a unique exception because Jews were attacked by everybody, everywhere they went. And so when you're constantly under assault for whatever reason, religious basis, skin pigmentation, faith, whatever it is, and you're always on the outs, you tend to stick together. And there's two groups that come to mind very specifically about that, who've guarded their culture and protect themselves because they've always felt under siege. And I'm not talking about the Afrikaners, I'm talking about Europe. I'm talking about Jews and Zigeuner, or Gypsies, the Roma people, who come from India originally. And they came centuries ago to Europe, and they've remained a group. And their cultural ties are strong, and that binds them from Romania or from Turkey all the way through the Balkans up into Central Europe. And those communities have very similar. They stay in contact, even in days of horse-drawn carriages. They were in very close contact. Those are closed communities that stay within themselves. That's different. Most people who migrate today tend to, within 2 generations, not intentionally, but they wind up losing that connection to their homeland, wherever it is. That's just the nature of migration today. There are exceptions to it, but those are historical groups. And even today, like in America, you have so many Jews who marry Christians or people of other faiths, and then you have this, what are your children going to be? Are they Jewish? Are they Christian? Are they Catholic? What is it? And so even that ethnicity is not under assault, but it's something that's challenged. So those are good things out there. Mark de Villers says, telling Brett, that's exactly what I am. Apparently Mark has an Anglo parent and an Afrikaans parent. I'm going to guess the father was the Afrikaner, given the surname de Villiers. But anyway, but I think that's
Chris, sorry to bring it up. I just have to run in about 2 minutes. I've got a show. I've got an interview on my channel at 7, and I still need to do some prep for it.
Not to worry. I needed to cut off anyway because I have my news program here in about 17 minutes. So we were going to end anyway. But so thanks a lot, Ernst, for coming on. We came to talk about the election, but we went quite far afield from that, talking about cases that AfriForum is currently involved in. Also talked, interesting enough, about culture, which is one of my affectations as a cultural anthropologist. So that's always of interest to me as well. But thank you so much for being a guest on the program once again. Ernst, I'll give you the floor if you want to leave any last thoughts about the election or about what's going on in South Africa with our audience, and then we'll close out.
Well, Chris, thank you very much again for the opportunity. I always enjoy chatting to you because our conversations always go in these unexpected directions. I really like the path that our conversation took, and also again, your audience is unmatched. Thank you very much for all their questions and all your comments in your live chat section. It's really fun to read it and really fun to check what people have to say, if they agree or disagree. But they're all very respectful, and it's very nice. You've created a nice little community here. But if people are unaware about what content I create, I have a YouTube channel called Conscious Caracal, and I also am on Twitter, Conscious Caracal. And you can find a link to my YouTube channel in the description of this video. And if you want to go follow me on Twitter, it's at ConCaracal, so ConCaracal. And go check, come say hi. And but thank you very much, Chris. This was very fun. And I look forward to hosting you on my channel again. I just need to sort out my schedule, maybe first thing in the new year.
Oh, okay. I thought you say next week. No, the year. No, that sounds great. Okay, thanks a lot, Ernst. We appreciate it. Bye, Donkey. It's good to see you once again. I'll let you get off and get ready for that. There you go, folks. Ernst Van Zyl, the Conscious Caracal, here sharing his insights and views with us. Thank you very much, Ernst. Yeah, that was fantastic. For those of you who were able to hang around or come back in about 15 minutes, it'll be Indaba African News of the Day. I have a selection of news from across the continent, including South Africa, and that will be the story. I am wearing a rugby jersey in case anybody's curious. It's a Scotland jersey. This is the current jersey Scotland's wearing. So there you go. Pretty cool little patterns down here on the bottom. Oops, there you go. Anyway, nice patterns. Anyway, so yes, I was wearing a rugby jersey today. It's a Scotland jersey, and you probably noticed it from the little flower, whatever it is that Scotland has up there for that flower. Anyway, so thanks a lot for tuning in, folks. I appreciate your support for the channel. And be sure to check out Conscious Caracal's content. It's fantastic. He's got an amazingly impressive effort he puts forward there, whether it's interviewing on behalf of AfriForum or it's for himself. He does a really good job with that. And he's got the coolest moniker on YouTube, the Conscious Caracal. Never thought of caracals as conscious. I thought them as scavengers. But ever since I saw his channel, I've kind of fallen in with that. Lee Roberts says, I agree, Chris. That's why I invested in places like Klein Fontaine and their goals, but I have responsibilities towards my children's education. Yeah, cool. Jean Dubrun says, hi, everyone. I'm an Afrikaner, but 3/4 English when I started working in the USA 8 years ago. I could not speak English to save my life. Oh, that's interesting. Interesting. Well, there you have it, folks. I'll be back on here in just a few minutes. Thistle. What's thistle? Neil Toner says thistle. I'm not sure what he's talking about. But anyway, thanks a lot, folks. And I'll be back here in a short order for the Indaba African News of the Day. Bottom of the hour. Tune in. Catch you right there. Please come back. Let's see if we can get an audience approaching the size of this one. We had about 100 people tune in for this program. Thanks a lot. I got to tell you, to date, I've had Steve Hofmeyer on the channel. I have lots of politicians on the channel, even some celebrities. And to date, the Conscious Caracal is still the largest attraction. On my old channel before it was sanctioned and removed by YouTube, his appearance on my program attracted more viewers than did Steve Hofmeyer's. I had over 500 viewers tune in live simultaneously when Conscious Caracal was on the channel. We're a far cry from that today, but there are far fewer people watching YouTube than there were just 8 months ago. So the viewership is down across the board for everybody. So that's pretty. Oh, Scott equals Thistle. Oh, this is a thistle. Thank you. Sorry, Scotland. Yeah, it's a thistle. You are correct. Okay, I was like, where's he coming from? Yes, this is a thistle. Yeah, that's right. That's correct. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for that, Neil. He says, never mind. No, you got to understand, folks. I'm looking at chat over here. I'm grabbing things out of the blue. I don't see the @Chris, and I just happen to see that over there. So anyway, thistle. Got you, Neil. Thank you. You didn't have to retract it. I got it. Scott equals, but it would be SCOT, not two T's there, Kevin. But thank you very much. It is the correct. It's a thistle. Thank you very much for that. Anyway, Ruikat's awesome. Yeah, he is pretty good. Thank you. I prefer the name, in Afrikaans, the Ruikat, the red cat. It's much better than Caracal, but both are cool. Anyway, folks, that's it. I'll be back in a few minutes with Indaba African News of the Day. Already prepared for that, so you're not going to miss out on anything. Not like I'm jumping into it. So, all right, that's it. See you guys here shortly. God bless and be safe out there. And be sure to check out the Conscious Caracal. He's got fantastic content. Cheers. $84 likes. We had 100 people watching and 84 likes. We hit 99 viewers and we got 84 likes. Still 60 people hanging out there. 84 likes. There's 85. Things that make you go, That's it. 85. Looks like the best we're going to be able to do. Cheers, everybody.